All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us for the first time on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share. If you're listening to us on one of the podcast sites, also subscribe and share. And anywhere else, we really appreciate this. Definitely get this out to as many people as you can. We do have a returning guest who I'm a fan of, and we went through her whole song and dance of her career at UF as a soccer player over there. And there's been a lot of changes since we spoke last at UF, Parker. We're going to talk about that in just a second. This is Parker Roberts, back on, former UF soccer star. And she's got a lot of things to say. We're going to talk about soccer and therapy and everything in between. So, first of all, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it last time. So I was pleased when you asked me to do it again. So I'm happy to be here.
Regardless of that, what is your opinion on the decision? I'm sure you know, talk to a lot of girls that are still playing. A lot of them are still your friends, of course. What is the talk about? You know, we don't have to mention names, but what have they been saying about the new coach now?
Yeah, I think they're all really excited. Change can be really hard. I think there was a lot of stress about the team when Becky did announce that she was retiring. So obviously that's a really stressful time for players, not really for me since I was done. I was like, thank you for sticking it out while I'm still here, and leaving when I do. But I think a lot of players were feeling a bit overwhelmed, because it does put into question, am I going to stay? Am I going to leave? Should I go somewhere else, or what should I do? And you definitely had players just feeling all over the place, but that's completely normal when you have three coaches coming in, unfamiliar faces, and it kind of turns your world upside down for a little bit. A similar thing happened to me, not similar, but I was committed to Miami when I was younger, and then the coach ended up getting fired. So that kind of completely shifted my plans. And I think that's just something that they were going to have to wait and see who they brought on, kind of evaluate. And it's hard because the timing of it, he got hired right before preseason, like a month or so before. So it's really hard, the anticipation definitely builds up. And but I know that the players have gotten to have some really good conversations with him before starting any soccer stuff. So I think that's been great. And what I've heard from everyone is that he really wants to win. And it's practices are very different. I have heard that, but in a good way. I haven't heard any complaints. People still say it's different and sometimes it's hard, but I think everyone's really excited. And change can absolutely be a really hard thing to come to terms with, but everyone's just really excited because I think they feel like this change will be good. So yeah, positive feedback. And I haven't met him yet. I want to, but I also don't just want to text him and be like, hey, I'm an alumni. Can I meet you? So I've just kind of been living through my teammates and my old teammates, and they've been filling me in. But so far, really positive feedback, and I'm excited to keep up with games. I know that they're going to be, this team could have used a little bit more intensity and maybe somebody who gets on them a little bit more with certain things. So I think that's going to be really beneficial.
So obviously the first games are coming up. I think the first game is actually in 2 days. It's an exhibition game. I just looked it up online. So it does say two days from now. We're taping this on the 10th. The first exhibition game is on the 12th. And then it looks really like a tough schedule. I mean, USF, you were there. You played USF. They've really grown as far as women's soccer I remember like maybe 7, 8 years ago, they were not as good as they are now. Texas is a great team, of course. I mean, they're always near the top of the Big 12 and always in the NCAA tournament. They had a great year last year. Obviously, UCF, Miami is okay, but then Florida State. So it looks like, as far as the schedule now, is an extremely tough schedule. I mean, even looking down, North Carolina's always got a great team. And then, you go into the SEC play. So what are you expecting? Because a lot of these girls on the team. Obviously, there was not a lot of time for this new coach to come in and do a lot of recruiting since this COVID and all this crap happened this last year. So what are you expecting with such a tough schedule coming up?
I have absolutely no idea. This past year is kind of a hard year to judge based off of, because if you look at our fall season that we had and then compare it to our spring season, it was like two completely different teams. So I think that's kind of unfair to base it off of that. Yeah, I know they have a preseason game in 2 days against was it Southern
Southern
Mississippi,
Miss,
I
you got
believe.
it.
Yes. So I know that they're really excited just to play and just to have a little bit more normalcy this year. I think of course things are still crazy with COVID and getting tested, but now the vaccines are available. Most of the team is vaccinated, and that definitely changes things. Definitely eases minds a little bit when it comes to the testing, just because it's a little bit different now and not as it's not at the climax like it was when we were trying to play in the fall last year. So I think a little bit of normalcy is going to help these players a lot. I know in the spring, even when we experienced a little bit more normalcy than the fall, is when we really started to get a little bit more comfortable again and not be so anxious or stressed about things. So really, I have no idea what to expect. I'm really excited. I'm going to try to make it to as many games as possible. I still have lots of friends on the team, and I'm going to miss it a lot. So I'm really excited to go watch. And based on what I've heard with these coaches, I think they're going to bring a lot of intensity. I think the style of play is going to change a little bit, but maybe that's a good thing for the players that are still there. So I think it's going to be intense. It's going to be fun. I think there's going to be some really good games, and I don't know if the schedules were already made before the new coach came in or how that works. But Becky always loved playing hard schedules.
Right.
Whether we were having a good season or not, she still said this is the best way to learn. If you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best and hang with them. So I always really enjoyed those games, and I think that's when we always played our best as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
We've been talking about Becky, and last time we talked, and I had her on the program even before you came on that first time, and she was telling me the song and dance that she was ready to travel, she was ready to be done, and then all of a sudden, I get this notification on my phone that says new interim coach at Orlando Pride is Becky Burleigh. So extreme surprise from somebody that we thought was going to be fully done with soccer. I mean, I know you talked, how fondly she was and how she affected your life in general. So, what happened there? Do you know any of that story? I'm sure you probably talked. You don't have to give away the whole story, but it was from a woman that I spoke to as far as an interview that said she was totally done with soccer. She needed a break. She was traveling all over the place. And all of a sudden, the Orlando Pride comes calling, and it's boom, back into the soccer pitch again.
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. I remember I got a text from a former national team teammate, and she plays for the Pride now, and she texted me and she's like, "Hey, what do you think of Becky and Alan?" And I was like, "They're awesome. I love them. Like, why are you asking?" And she goes, "They're our coaches now." And I was like, totally mind blown. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, come on, I need more details." And then I get a text from Sarah Loudon, one of our old volunteer coaches, manager type person. She did everything. She's awesome. And she was like, "Put your boots back on." And I was like, "Wait," I was like, "What is going on?" And then I texted Becky and Alan, and I was like, "Are you guys coaching Orlando Pride?" And they were like, "Yeah, we are." So I knew a few days before it became public, just because I do have friends on the Pride.
Right.
But I was super happy for them. I know it can be tough. You say you're done with the sport that you've been involved with your whole life, and then an opportunity comes up and you're like, "Never mind, I miss it." It's like you try to get away from it, but sometimes you just can't. And I know she was traveling. I know she got the call about the position when she was on vacation, and she flew home right away so she could join them. But yeah, I think it's hard to stay away from something that you love so much and something you've done your whole life.
So how do you think she'll fit into that situation? I mean, you have a lot of national team or former national team players on that team. Sydney Leroux, obviously she wasn't in the Olympics, but she was a national team player for quite some time. Obviously, Alex Morgan. There's a lot, there's former Gators on that team. I know Eric is on that team. She used to play for UF. I believe there's a couple others. I'm just not thinking correctly off the top of my head right now. But that team does have a lot of talent on that. How do you feel like she'll mesh with that talent?
Yeah, so I mean, she, like you said, she has experience coaching the best of the best. She coached Abby Wambach when they won a national championship, Heather Mitz, Danielle Fotopoulos, all those high caliber players that have won Olympic medals, have won World Cup. So Becky is definitely experienced, and just because she coached college for the past however many years, doesn't mean that she's going to change her philosophies. And I think that that is a philosophy that could be used in that league. And I think she's going to be very successful with it. I think whatever she did for me and my team would absolutely be beneficial for professionals, just like it was for us. And I think, especially in the league, it's you hear stories about coaches that are just, they're not players coaches. They don't enjoy being around the team. They just don't have that connection. And Becky is going to make sure she has that connection with everyone, including Marta, including Cindy LaRue.
Right.
She doesn't, of course, she respects them as players and as people, but she wants to make sure she has those relationships so that she can be the best coach for them. Because at the end of the day, she is now the leader of that team. And I know she wants to do the best that she can for them. And I don't think she's going to shy away from anything. She's going to be herself. She's going to do what she's always done. And I think the team, I've already seen multiple interviews of the team responding really well to the things that she's implemented. So I know that she's going to bring so much success for them. And I'm really excited to watch it.
Again, for people that are listening, Parker Roberts, number 22, former Florida Gators star. All right, so let's finish off the interview because I did want to talk about therapy. I mean, we really went in depth about soccer, I guess. So this is kind of weird to go from soccer to therapy, but I want to talk about this more in a sports realm because we do see a lot of big programs, and maybe you had this at Florida. I'm not 100% sure, but there's a lot of big programs that are having sports psychologists meet with the team now. So to, get rid of a lot of issues that maybe a player is having, whether it's with, family issues, with team issues. I don't know. Do they have that at Florida?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We had great resources. We had sports psychologists coming in all the time to talk to us as a team, just to let us know who they are, what they do, how they can help. And I know that they were utilized by many, many athletes at Florida. So that's great because, therapy can be expensive and time consuming. And as a college athlete, you don't necessarily have the time or the money to visit with one of these specialists. So it was really great. And, Becky was a huge advocate for it, totally supported us doing that. She had their phone number saved, would always pass them out to anyone who needed them. So it's really great. Yeah, we had the best resources.
When you talk to your family about going to therapy, how did they respond to it? And did you ever get that stigma that I know a lot of men that I'm friends with get, is that you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, man up, grow up, get a life, and that's the way they talk to them.
I've very much always been that way my entire life. It was, I don't need help. I'll tell you if I'm dying, but other than that, like, I'll figure it out on my own. I'm fine. I'll pick myself up. I'll do what I can on my own. And I've always been that way. But you get to a certain point where there's just so many factors in life that change. You're not in elementary school anymore. You're not in middle school anymore. Things get a little bit more intense, a little bit more serious. You go off on your own, and you have to deal with certain things that you've never had to deal with. And that can be really scary. And I know that anxiety has always been very real. And in past generations, it just wasn't talked about because
Right.
nobody really knew what it was and how it could affect you physically and emotionally. There are people who get physically sick and are, they can't move because of it. And it's really scary. And I know it's always been around, but there was that stigma, it was, I just got to tough it out. I got to figure it out. And I can't ask for help, male or female. And so I just think that as the times change, this is actually a conversation I had with Becky because I told her about my anxiety and how I would struggle with it. And she was like, I'm just not super familiar with this because in my past teams, we haven't had to deal with this as much. Think of all the generations she's coached. And she was like, it hasn't been as present as it is now. And I really respected her for saying that. She was being very vulnerable. She was like, I'm not sure how to deal with this. I have a team full of people who probably have a lot of anxiety or, have suffered depression. It happens, especially in college. Being a female athlete in college is very, very hard and mentally taxing. And
Right.
so I know that that was definitely something that was new. And I don't think anyone really has the answers for how to go about it. I think just keep learning. I know we have like mental health awareness month now, and just so many people coming forward talking about how they got help and this is what they struggled with, and it's completely normal. I think that's a very strong feeling, knowing that you're not the only one who deals with it. And I think it's especially helpful when those older people come through and say, hey, 20 years ago when I was playing, this is what I went through. So it just shows that it has always been around. It just hasn't always been dealt with. And now I think people are dealing with it. And, maybe for some people that comes across as being weak or, they don't believe in that. Families don't believe in that. But, my sister is a strong advocate for therapy. She was totally with me through the whole thing. She was like, Parker, it's not weird. She was like, I've gone to therapy for so long, taking anxiety medicine, and you just have to do what's best for you and whatever's helpful. So that was really helpful having her perspective, because we had never really talked about that. And eventually I told my parents, and my parents were just like, oh, good. How's it going? So it's just, they just understood. They were like, you need to do that for you. I have nothing against that. And, there might be families still, and I'm sure there are, who are just like telling their kids, you need to tough it out
Right.
and whatnot. But I think as the parents know their kids, they can see when they're struggling. And my parents know me so well. They knew when I was struggling, they could read it. And they would always ask me like, are you okay? Are you okay? And me, I was just like, yes, like stop asking me, I'm fine. But on the inside, I was hurting. And so that's when I knew I had to talk to someone, because I didn't want to talk to my parents about it, or and I usually do tell my parents everything. So mom and dad, if you hear this, I love you guys. I tell you everything, I promise. But there's just certain things and feelings that you can't even explain. You can't explain it to someone who you know and love so much. It's a lot of times they're irrational thoughts too. It's very normal. That just comes with it. So I think that parents should understand more, and they should pay attention to their kids and present it as an option. I think if you become aware of it at a young age, then that could solve a lot of issues too, because you grow up hearing about it and knowing that you have a resource and that's an option. But so many people in my generation, you don't grow up learning about it. So then you kind of have to deal with it later. So if you could just deal with it sooner, then that would be really helpful.
Your mom was awesome. She sent me a message on Facebook.
Oh
It
my
said she
gosh, of course she
it said she loved
did.
the interview. This was a little while back. But
Yeah.
she said she loved the interview and stuff. We chatted for, one or two times after that, but that was great. I was so happy that she watched it and enjoyed it. So
She
if you
shared it
are,
on Facebook. She's so supportive. She loves all of this. She's just the best.
well, when you do listen to this, Miss Roberts, thanks so much for listening, and we enjoy it, and we hope to have Parker on again another time. But I know I said the last question, but I want to just get two more in, and thanks for being so gracious with your time.
Yeah.
The last two questions was, I know you talked a little bit about this in the first interview, how, obviously COVID really struck your life. Luckily, you did have Brett to lean on. You guys did work out with each other. And I know everything was closed down at that time. Can you talk a little bit though, as far as the mental health aspect was with COVID, and how I guess it even still is, because even though we have the vaccine shots, we are still unaware of this new Delta variant, or another variant that could come on down the road. It's just very uncertain as far as life goes. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, and I think I'm lucky in that, I could have been dealing with a lot worse things during COVID. For me, it was just a change in life, which can be hard on anyone. And I know people handle it differently, but some people really suffered, or their family suffered and struggled. So I'm very thankful that I had that support. I had a place to live, food to eat, all of that. But
Right.
when it comes to the mental health part, it really rocked my world, and I wasn't expecting it to. And I think that's what was so scary, was I wasn't expecting it. I was like, oh, a few months off of life, like, sure, I'll sit back and relax. And then before you know it, it's month 10 and you're like, oh my gosh, I am miserable. Like, I'm still stressed. And At the beginning, it was really scary seeing. It's almost like I was watching a movie and I was having like an out of body experience, just observing, the TV, the news was on all the time. It was just really sad, talking about people dying, people getting sick, it's spreading, everything shut down, streets are empty. Europe was in major lockdown, can't go anywhere, can't leave your house. And it just didn't feel real. It felt so scary. And I think unknown is like all of the uncertainties with it and the unknowns is what was really scary, because we're, as Americans, especially, we're so used to just doing our business, being super busy people and knowing what's coming. And so suddenly when your world gets shut down, we didn't know when we were going back to sports. We didn't know when stuff was going to start opening. When could I go eat at a restaurant with my friends? When could I even see my friends? And just worrying about the health of your family too. My parents lived down the street from me in Gainesville, and I hardly saw them at first because I was so scared that I was going to give it to them. And they are a little bit older. They're in, like, at least they're not old, but they're in a range where you have to be cautious. And
And
so
watch
I was
what you
always,
say on here, by the way. Be careful.
but I was always just so nervous because I was like, I would never forgive myself if I gave it to them and something happened. And so you just have those thoughts constantly running through your head. And then just sitting inside all day, you try to work out and you're just so anxious that you physically can't because it's so overwhelming. It's almost hard to describe. Right now, hearing myself, it sounds kind of dumb because it's like, okay, so you just sat around all day, like, why is that so bad? And you don't think it would be until it happens to you, and you miss your friends. You haven't seen them in forever. You miss just being able to do the most basic things, like go to the grocery store, go over to my parents' house, or have a team meeting. At that point, I was like, give me 5-hour team meeting. I'm fine. Like, I'll do it. I don't care. And it was just really sad because you didn't know anything. And then it just kept going and going and going. And we saw spring sports get canceled. We saw winter sports get, their NCAA tournament, like our gymnastics team was absolutely killing it. And suddenly
Right.
they're shut down. And it's just like, how is this fair? You're seeing all of these athletes have to go through this. And then, I was thinking at the time, I'm so lucky I'm going to be back playing. Like, I didn't miss a season. And then all of a sudden season's delayed, COVID cases are rising. We're getting tested 3 times a week. So it was like over a year that, especially as athletes, you're just struggling. Your fitness is off. You can't work out how you normally do. We couldn't even play soccer with like more than 4 people at one time for a certain amount of time. And that's really hard to prepare for a season when you're doing that. You can't lift with more than a small group of people. You're lifting in a mask. You're trying to do fitness in a mask. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. And it just really changed. When everything changes at once, it turns everything upside down. Some of the changes for the better, for sure, but when everything changes at once, it's like a big slap, and you're just like, oh my gosh, okay, everything's different. And you adapt to it over time, but when it just keeps going and going, and still today, I still get anxious about certain things with COVID. People are still getting tested. It's still spreading. People are wearing masks all over again. And there's new variants. And it's just like, when is this ever? You just get so scared that you're going to go back to that place of the TV news on all the time, nobody in the streets, not seeing anyone. So it's really scary. It totally changes your life, especially for my senior year. All I had ever known was normal. That's all I ever knew was a normal college soccer season. And all of a sudden, in my final year, everything is different. And so I think just everything changing at once is just really overwhelming.
We'll end with that. So, first of all, Parker, thanks so much for coming on. Again, for people that are listening, it's Parker Roberts, number 22, former number 22 on your University of Florida Gators women's soccer team. But no, Parker, thanks so much for coming on all the time and being so hospitable about doing this. It means a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a blast.
And people can follow you at your Instagram. And what was that again?
I think it's just at Parker Roberts. There might be an extra R in there somewhere, but just Parker Roberts.